Let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. Of course, now is the time of the year we love doing this on this channel, is after the draft. We go through especially the day 2 and day 3 picks of each and every team and find moves we really like, look at what teams are saying and doing. And there's one draft pick in the particular we want to really dive into for the Cincinnati Bengals, and that is the selection in the middle of the third down, wide receiver Burton from the University of Alabama. Let's get into this article, and then we'll talk about it more in detail on what Burton will mean for Cincinnati. On the other side, this is courtesy of ESPN. Bengals coach Zach Taylor says the team was comfortable drafting former Alabama wide receiver Jermaine Burton despite off-field concerns. Following his selection, Taylor said the team really got to know Burton through the pre-draft process and felt, quote, really good about the pick. We did our research on all these guys and that we've talked to and made sure that we're aware of every incident they've been a part of, Taylor said. There's certainly maturity things that come with some of these guys coming out of these college. That's one of the things he'll continue to grow with. All right, Miles, I was a big fan of the Burton pick. I love watching him in college, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on this and what it could mean for Cincinnati going forward. But first, Bengals fans, in the comment section below, now that the draft is concluded, give us your favorite draft pick the Bengals pulled off through all 3 days of the NFL draft. There's a lot of really interesting ones, but we want to hear from you specifically. Pick one and put it in the comment section below. But Miles, give me your thoughts on the addition of Burton to this Bengals offense.
Yeah, Nick, I think this is a guy who came in, he started out at Georgia, left Georgia, moved over to Alabama, and really did some great things here. And I think it's kind of funny when you read some of the knocks on him as he underperformed in college. Well, if underperforming at college is being the leading receiver at Alabama for 2 years in a row in both yards and in 2023, as well as receiving touchdowns, sign me up because it sounds pretty good to me. This is a guy who also has been very available. He's only missed 2 games in his college career so far, one in 2021 with a minor groin injury, and then one in 2023 with illness. So this is a guy who's very available. Sometimes people hear the old adage, the best ability is availability. So I think Burton, he's got all of the talent to be an NFL wide receiver. He has some great stats his last 2 seasons in college. And I think that he is a good fit for this Bengals team, potentially that, they have a wide receiver issue going on. Who knows where T. Higgins is going to be the next year? It's good to take a gamble on a guy that could potentially be that next starting wide receiver of beside Jamar Chase for you. So I think this was a really good pickup. And then we address the off-field concerns. He had an incident back a few years ago. I think that this is something that he has moved past. Like he said, he grew up from it. I think that he, acknowledged that it was wrong. He moves on from it. But at this day and age in the NFL, do these things really matter that much? We make them into big deals, especially like during the draft. They'll bring up stuff like this. As soon as something happens, we'll bring this stuff up. But a few days later, nobody cares about these things in the NFL anymore. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. They probably should care about some of this stuff a little bit more, but it just doesn't seem to affect the business of the NFL that much as long as the person didn't get in trouble, which he did not. People forget about the Rashee Rice thing already. I'm sure a lot of people don't even remember that until I bring it up. But that's something, that's a big incident that happened this offseason. People talk about Deshaun Watson as if he was a Saint still, but he had a lot of stuff going on as well. I just think that people blow these things out of proportion too many times. And I think that Burton is going to come in. He's probably going to be a productive player. And just because he had some, trouble technically it was on the field at the time, doesn't mean that he's not going to be a successful, productive receiver for the Bengals.
Yeah, I agree with your statements there. Look, I think anything, you have to evaluate the whole picture, and that includes someone's character when you're evaluating a prospect. But you also, and smart teams understand this too, you're dealing with 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. Look, if you've evaluated my decision-making at 19, you'd honestly say I was the biggest idiot on the face of planet Earth, right? I think a lot of people would say that about themselves. So, look, with Burton's situation, I won't go into the details of that. That's obviously something that's a completely different discussion. But I do think what smart teams do is they keep that in the back of their mind. We're like, okay, let's not bury 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, right? There are teams that literally passed on Calvin Johnson, one of the great receivers of all time, or had him fall on their draft board at least, because they were concerned with the fact that he smoked a joint at Georgia Tech which is, I mean, if it's laughable to think about that in today's day and age, that you would pass or downgrade a player for something like that, but that's just the reality of it. But focusing on what Burton can bring to the field, and I think that's the real thing here. People were kind of critical of Burton because his raw numbers aren't absolutely spectacular. But people forget, people who actually watch SEC football in Alabama, that was an old school Alabama power running team. They had a lot of issues in pass protection. Jalen Milroe, their starting quarterback, was very, very inconsistent. Anyone who watched Alabama play knew Burton was great, knew he was a phenomenal player. He just wasn't getting as many opportunities. He was their big time third down guy. He was a big play threat. He was everything for Alabama. He was just as good as other great Alabama receivers were in years past in terms of being the number one guy. He just wasn't getting the volume because the team around him wasn't as good throwing the football as it has been in years past with guys like Bryce Young and Tua and Mac Jones and things like that. So this was a situation where Burton's numbers aren't down because it's his fault. It was actually the team around him at Alabama in terms of stylistically, they were not as good throwing the football. And his physical tools are, the thing is incredible, right? He's 6 feet tall, runs a 4.4 40, has a 38-inch vertical, is a strong guy. He checks all these boxes, but it's one of these weird things where there's just enough little nagging concerns that he falls in the draft. But he's a really, really darn good football player, and I think he's going to be a big time weapon for this Bengals offense. I think really out the gate. Now, look, I'm not saying he's going to be their number one receiver. I don't even think he's going to be number two. But you talk about a guy that can handle tough coaching, handle being in a tough competitive environment. He played in Georgia. He played in Alabama. He play in the SEC. He can handle being in the Cincinnati Bengals, being in the NFL, and being not the number one or not the number two guy, just getting a few targets per game and making the most of them. I think this is one of the sneaky good moves at the NFL draft, the Bengals drafting Burton here.